In this clip, we're going to go ahead and finish our rock. So here, as you can see, I have dramatically changed the shape of the rock. I was playing around with it for about an hour and just realized that the extension here was a little bit too much, and it just sort of cleaned up these corners here, give it a little bit less detail because I still want to keep it rather stylized. So at this point, I'm ready to start adding some detail. Depending on what kind of sort of style you're going for, depending on what kind of game you're making this for, this could possibly have been already a finished rock if you were going for a very, very stylized, sort of cartoony, maybe like, a mobile game or sort of like a fairy tale style. But I'm keen to give it a little bit of a detail. I want to give it slight detail just so it looks a little bit more sort of mid-range between the stylized and realistic. So let's go ahead. First thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and use a surface brush. Now I have a bunch of my own, and there's an Orbs surface brushes. They're really great. So I'm going to go ahead and actually use one of those. And I'm just going to go ahead and slide that right here. So perhaps use Alt. And just going to drag them around a little bit. So don't be too worried. We're kind of adding a little bit to the shape, and you want to give them big strokes so they kind of change the shape of the rock a little bit. So that's pretty good down here. Now, as you can see, it's a little bit messy now. So perhaps I'll add a few smaller ones around. And I'm just sort of dragging it, holding Alt, and that's pretty good. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and grab the Orbs flatten brush and just sort of bring that detail back in. In fact, I'm going to use the H polish, and I'm going to add a square alpha to it and just go ahead and clean this up a little bit. So that sort of brought a little bit more detail to the stone, made it a little bit more interesting, gave it a little bit more surface detail here. So I'm going to go in and polish that out. Pretty good. So I don't really want to keep most of that detail. I want to get rid of it. But what happened is that, as you can see, it now gave us a really nice surface detail, which will really bring up the normal map in the future. The only thing I'm a bit worried about is that it's slightly dented in, and I want it to be more out. So I'm going to grab the move brush here and just going to push it out a little bit. Here we go. That's pretty good. So again, H polish. Just gonna go here and polish these out a little bit. So leaving a little bit of that sort of detail, but in the same time trying to clean up. And again, this is gonna really bring that irregularity to the stone, so it won't look like, just a really flat surface. It would look a little bit more interesting, a little bit more specular detail, a little bit more normal detail there, which would really help you. So I'm just going to bring the brush up a little bit. And I'm using the square alpha to sort of leave these little marks behind. And that sort of really sells the shape of the rock here. Alt on this one. Make it slightly bigger. And let's just go ahead into Orbs flatten brush now. And just go in and clean this up a little bit more. Make it a little bit more flat. It's perfect. A little bit messy here, so I want to really fix this area. It's looking very good. Just gonna go ahead and fix here a little bit. And again, stone takes a long time to sort of master, so a lot of practice is required, and it definitely has been a long time since I sculpted rocks last. It's a little bit tricky to come back to it, so it takes a little bit longer at first, but after your first rock you speed up every time, and it really builds a good foundation for the next module, which would be sculpting cliffs, which are a little bit harder, a little bit bigger, and a little bit more detailed. That's pretty good. I like this. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get Orbs brush here, Orbs crack brush rather, and I'm going to go in and start bringing in a little bit more surface detail here at the cracks. Just draw a few cracks here. It's perhaps a little too much. Maybe one over here. Looks pretty good. A little bit too small for my taste. Let's just grab it bigger. It's pretty good. So now I'm just sort of breaking in, highlighting those details, just using light strokes here. And I haven't actually done the back, but I can do that on my own later. So really want to focus on that front for you. Here we go. That's pretty good. And just a little bit more here. And it looks rather simple, but it does take a long time to get it all polished out. And oftentimes you still would have a little bit of those artifacts left from sculpting when you finish your rock. It's almost impossible to get it absolutely perfect, but it actually helps a little bit to sell the rock a little bit more. So I'm just going to get rid of this one. Just going to go here a little bit. So I'm just drawing these strokes here just to give it a little bit more rock shape. And at this point, I'm not too worried about what they look like. I just want to give it a little bit of that rocky feel here. And now I'm just going to grab the H polish brush again. Perhaps actually AJ polish. And just start bringing those back a little bit. So I'm going to grab the smooth valleys and just smooth that out a little bit more. It's pretty good. So I don't want the cracks to be too permanent. I want them to be sort of very mild here, so I'm just gonna help them out a little bit, blend them with the rock a little bit more. And again, just gonna grab H polish and really polish this bit out. Smooth peaks, smooth valleys. Just do the same here. And here, I'm just gonna grab the Orbs flatten brush and just gonna go in and flatten this bit out a little bit more. In fact, I'm just gonna grab the planar, really go in there. Don't want those cracks to be too dominant. This area a little bit too messy, so let's go ahead and try and get this fixed up. So I'm just gonna go in and flatten that out. Here we go, and get that out as well. Pretty good. And I'm just gonna go in and get this cleaned up here. Pretty good. And that's looking very good. Help this out a little bit. So as you can see, these sort of little cracks really helped. Kind of added a little bit of texture to the stone, but in the same time you don't want them to be too strong. Now these kinds of cracks really work on stones that are man-made, like for instance if you were to make bricks or things like that that really add a lot of cool detail to the stone. But on a rock like this you wouldn't have any sort of natural cracks. It wouldn't crack like that because it's really solid foundation, so it wouldn't have anything like this. So in here, for instance, we can pretend that this rock was so heavy that it broke upon itself, so we can add a little bit of a crack on the bottom here. But again, try to be really sparing with those cracks, because first of all, if you have this rock repeating a lot, then it would sort of appear too much in the game. You would notice it a little bit too much. That's pretty good, and I'm really liking where this is going. Now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and add an extra layer of detail, and again, this would be perfect already. You could already go ahead and submit that as a final rock for certain styles, but I want to go ahead and add a little bit extra. So I'm just going to go in and select the Orbs noise brush here. And again, just going to make the brush rather big. And just going to make it really light intensity. I'm just going to spray that detail around here. Pretty good. And now I'm going to grab the planar brush and go back in a little bit. And just flatten those bits out. And that's going to really give that nice rocky texture to this rock. Go here a little bit. So as you can see, I'm trying to flatten most of it, but leave a little bit of that noise around. And that's sort of really going to help our specular map. Because if your rock's a little bit too flat, you might notice that the roughness, unless they're absolutely rough, you will notice that they sort of sheen a little bit weird. So you always want a little bit of a detail texture on it. And oftentimes I would add those details in Substance Painter, but I do prefer to see it in ZBrush, so I kind of trying to add as much of it as possible. I'm just going to flatten here a little bit. And that is looking pretty good. So at this point, I would be willing to call this a finished rock. I'm going to go ahead and finish it up a little bit, polish it out, clean it up a little bit. But this is pretty much it for this module. In the next module, we're going to go ahead and start making our cliff.